The city of Arkan shone like a jewel under the twin suns. Its tall crystal towers sparkled in shades of blue and silver, and wide bridges stretched across the sky like ribbons. On this day, every street was filled with life. Tens of thousands of alien citizens had gathered for a great ceremony. Bright banners of the royal house waved in the wind, and strange musical instruments filled the air with a deep echoing sound. In the middle of the vast plaza stood Milan, a human among giants. He was not tall, not powerful, and certainly not royal compared to the shimmering alien crowd. His plain clothes and simple face made him look ordinary. Most who noticed him gave puzzled glances. Why was a human here, standing in the place of nobles and warriors? Milan himself had no answer. All he knew was that a letter had arrived at his small home the night before, marked with the seal of the royal family, summoning him to the event. He remembered the words clearly. You are required to attend the great naming at the Royal Plaza. The message gave no reason. It was not a request, it was an order. Now, as he stood among strangers, Milan felt both curious and uneasy. The aliens were tall and graceful, their skin carrying soft hues of silver, green, and pale gold. Their long eyes shimmered like crystals, and their voices blended into the sound of the ceremony. Milan felt invisible among them, but at the same time, he felt every stare that passed over him. The plaza grew quiet when the royal guards entered. Their armor glowed with faint light, and each step echoed like thunder. The crowd parted, forming a path that led directly to the towering stage at the center. Upon it stood the royal throne, carved from white stone that seemed to shine from within. Drums beat, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then she appeared. Princess Erin stepped forward, tall and radiant, her long silver hair flowing like liquid light. Her robe shimmered with symbols of her people's history, and her eyes, bright like polished gems, carried strength and calm at once. The crowd bowed low, thousands moving in a single wave of respect. Milan froze. He had never seen her in person before, only heard whispers. The princess was said to be wise beyond her years, fearless in judgment, and unyielding against those who sought to control her. Yet here she stood, graceful and powerful, commanding silence without a word. Erin raised her hand, and the plaza became still. My people, her voice rang clear, echoing against the tall towers. Today, we gather not only for tradition, but for a choice that will shape our future. You came to witness the naming, to hear who I choose to stand beside me. This is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of truth, of courage, of spirit. The crowd murmured, excitement and tension mixing in the air. Nobles leaned forward. Warriors gripped their weapons tightly. Every soul wanted to know the name she would speak. Milan, standing far in the back, felt a strange unease. Surely she would name one of the proud generals or the clever scholars. That was how it had always been done. The princess would choose a partner from among her people, someone strong, respected, and noble. Erin lifted her gaze, scanning the crowd slowly. Her eyes glided past rows of tall figures, past the lords and captains, past the proud families, dressed in glittering robes. Then her hand rose. The silence deepened, her finger extended, and it pointed directly at Milan. The crowd gasped. Whispers turned into cries. Faces turned toward the lone human, who stood frozen as though lightning had struck him. His chest tightened, his throat dry. Surely this was a mistake. Surely she meant someone behind him. He turned his head slightly, but no, her gaze locked firmly onto his. That one, Erin said, her voice unwavering. That is my husband. The words rolled across the plaza like thunder. Thousands of voices burst into confusion. Some cried out in disbelief, others shouted in protest. Nobles shook their heads violently, pointing at Milan as though the princess had insulted her own people. A human, a weak outsider. The very thought struck them as madness. Milan's heart pounded. He could barely breathe. Husband, she had called him her husband before the entire nation, and he had not even spoken to her once in his life. Why? Why him? Guards looked to one another, unsure of what to do. Elders whispered urgently, trying to understand the reason. The noise of the crowd grew louder, like the rising roar of an approaching storm. Yet through it all, Erin stood calm, her eyes never leaving Milan. She did not smile, nor did she waver. Her face carried no doubt. She had chosen, and her choice was final. Milan felt hundreds of eyes burning into him. His legs felt heavy. But somehow he found himself stepping forward, drawn by a force he did not understand. The crowd parted slowly as he walked, their stares cutting into him like sharp blades. Each step felt unreal. The music had stopped. The air was heavy. His mind spun with questions. Why me? Why here? Why now? When he reached the base of the stage, he lifted his gaze to the princess. For a moment, the world seemed to vanish. He saw only her, standing tall above him, her hand still stretched toward him as though she had been waiting all along. The crowd's voices rumbled in anger and disbelief, but Milan could not focus on them. His ears pounded with the sound of his own heartbeat. Then, for the first time, Erin smiled faintly, not to the crowd, not to her people, but to him. And in that moment, Milan felt a strange certainty settle over him. He did not understand it, but he knew one thing clearly. His life had just changed forever. The princess had chosen a human before thousands. The words had been spoken. The plaza of Arkan had always been a place of celebration and honor, but now it was filled with shock. The words of Princess Erin still hung in the air, echoing through the hearts of thousands. A human, chosen as husband of the princess? It sounded impossible, and yet it had been spoken with clear and steady voice. Milan stood at the base of the royal stage, feeling the weight of countless eyes pressing down on him. Whispers spread through the crowd like fire leaping across dry grass. Some voices were sharp with anger, others filled with disbelief, and a few carried laughter, as if the whole event was a cruel joke. Impossible, someone shouted from the rows of nobles. He is not one of us. Why a human? How can this be? Cried another. The crowd's harmony broke into chaos. Warriors gripped their spears, nobles shook their heads, and elders muttered among themselves. Even children pointed at Milan with wide eyes, asking questions their parents could not answer. Milan himself felt frozen. His hands trembled, his chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He had not spoken a single word, yet thousands judged him in that moment. He wished to vanish, to wake from what seemed like a dream. But no dream could feel this heavy. No dream could place him under the eyes of an entire empire. On the stage, Princess Erin raised her hand, signaling for silence. Her tall frame stood steady, her silver robe glinting under the light of the suns. She looked down upon her people, her voice calm but unyielding. You question my choice, she said. You wonder why a human stands before you. You whisper that he is unworthy. But I tell you, this strength is not always measured in size, nor is honor written only in bloodline. This man has proven a spirit that no title can give. The crowd quieted only slightly, enough to let her words be heard, but the unease did not fade. Murmurs continued, heads shook, and some nobles crossed their arms in defiance. Milan looked up at her, confused. He wanted to ask, "What have I proven? Why me?" But the words would not come. He was caught between fear and wonder, unable to understand why this powerful woman had chosen him of all people. An elder noble stepped forward from the crowd. His long robe trailed behind him, and his voice carried the weight of years. "Princess," he called, "the choice of a husband is not only personal. It shapes the throne. It binds the empire. Do you expect us to accept a weak outsider, one who knows nothing of our ways, to stand at your side?" His words found support. Many in the crowd nodded and murmured their agreement. A line of warriors struck their spears to the ground in protest. The sound rang like thunder across the plaza. Arden's eyes narrowed slightly. She did not back down. I have seen enough of strength that only crushes. I have seen enough of words that only boast. What I saw in him was different. He risked himself not for glory, not for power, but for others. When storms struck the lower districts, who ran into the floods to save the children? Not the generals, not the nobles. It was him, the human who you now call weak. Gasps spread through the crowd. Many had heard of that day when sudden storms had broken the shields around the city's edge. Few knew the details, fewer still knew who had taken action. Now, for the first time, the princess revealed the truth. Milan's mind raced. He remembered that day vividly. The storm had come with violent winds and heavy rain, and the city's protective walls had faltered. Small homes had been swept away, and frightened children had cried for help. He had not thought, only acted, pulling them to safety while others ran for cover. To him, it had not been heroic. It had been the only choice. But to Aaron, it had been everything. The crowd's voices rose again. Some were struck silent by her words. Others grew angrier. He is still not one of us. A warrior growled. Deeds do not make him worthy of the throne. Milan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but fear held him still. What could he say to thousands who doubted him? He was only one man. His voice would be swallowed in the storm of theirs. Yet Aaron did not waver. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage, her gaze sweeping across her people. "Do you think I seek your approval for what is mine to decide?" she asked. "I am your princess. My word is my bond, and my bond is law. This human has shown courage when others did not. That is why I name him. That is why he is my husband." Her voice cut through the noise with sharp strength. For a moment, silence returned. Heavy and tense. Milan felt the air grow colder. He realized then that her words had placed him in a position of great danger. The princess's authority had shielded him, but the anger of her people was a fire waiting to burn. From the back of the crowd, another noble raised his hand. His robe shimmered with golden thread, marking him as one of the High Council. His voice was smooth, but laced with challenge. "If the princess insists on this human," he declared, "then let him prove himself before the eyes of all. Let him face trials, as tradition demands. Only then may we see if her choice is wisdom or folly." The crowd cheered at the suggestion, voices rising like a tide. Yes, trials. Let him prove himself. Milan's stomach dropped. Trials? Against who? Against what? He had no training, no weapons, no knowledge of their customs. He was only human, an ordinary one at that. But Erin turned her head slightly, her eyes locking with his. For the first time, he saw something deeper in her gaze, not only authority, but trust. She believed in him, even when he did not believe in himself. She lifted her chin and answered the noble firmly. "Then let the trials come," she said. "Let every doubt be burned away by truth. He will stand, and I will stand beside him." The plaza shook with mixed cries. Some shouted in approval, others in scorn. But all knew what would come next. The human would face trials before the empire. His worth would be tested. Milan's heart pounded. He could not escape. He could not refuse. His life had been rewritten by a single moment. And now the eyes of thousands would follow his every step. As the suns dipped lower in the sky, the noise of the crowd still echoed. Shock had filled the day, but it was only the beginning. For Milan, silence was no longer possible. The path before him was set, and it led into the unknown. The plaza remained restless even after the princess's final words. The crowd did not know whether to stay silent in respect or shout in anger. Some whispered in confusion, some muttered in scorn, and others stared at Milan with wide eyes as if they could not believe a human stood at the center of their world. Milan stood at the base of the stage, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand why Erin, the most respected woman of her people, had chosen him. His thoughts ran in circles, his heart pounding. But he could not find the courage to ask. Erin, however, seemed to sense his confusion. She stepped forward, her long robe flowing like water across the stone floor of the stage. She lifted her hands, calling for silence once more. "My people," she began, her voice strong and clear, "you demand to know why I have chosen this human. You question my reason, and you think my words are spoken without thought. But I tell you now, my choice is not sudden. It is not foolish. It is truth born from what I have seen with my own eyes." The crowd quieted, eager to hear her. Even those who were filled with anger leaned closer. Erin turned her gaze toward Milan. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Then she looked back at her people and spoke again. Not long ago, she said, a storm fell upon the lower districts. The shields failed, and the waters rose high. Many were trapped, and many ran for safety. But not all who fled thought of others. Children were left crying, their small hands reaching out as the waters closed around them. Murmurs spread through the crowd. They remembered the storm. Many had heard stories of that day, though the details were never clear. In that moment of chaos, Aaron continued, this human ran into the flood. He had no weapon, no shield, no power. Yet he carried the children on his shoulders, pulling them from the waters. He fought against the storm itself. He saved lives, while many of our own people only thought of their safety. Milan felt heat rise in his chest. He remembered the storm well. The winds had howled, the rain had beaten hard, and the ground had shaken under the force of the flood. He had acted without thinking, moving from house to house, pulling frightened children from rising waters. He had been terrified, but there had been no choice. He could not leave them behind. He never thought anyone had noticed. He never thought his actions meant more than a small duty. Yet here stood the princess, speaking of that day before thousands. The people listened, some with surprise, some with shame. Arn's voice carried emotion that struck deep. This is why I chose him, she said, not because he is strong in body, but because he is strong in spirit. He did what many of us would not. He showed a courage that needs no title, no bloodline. He showed us what true strength is. The silence that followed was heavy. For a long moment, no one spoke. The truth of her words weighed on the plaza. Even those who hated the idea of a human husband could not deny the picture she painted. But then a noble broke the quiet. He stepped forward, his face lined with pride and anger. You speak of one moment, he said sharply. One storm, one act. Courage can burn bright for a breath and then vanish. How can we trust that this human can stand with you for a lifetime? How can we trust him with the weight of the throne? Others nodded in agreement, voices rising again. He is still an outsider, some shouted. He does not know our ways. He cannot rule among us. Milan felt their words strike him like stones. He wanted to speak, but fear held his tongue. He was only one man, and they were many. Arn's voice rose again, firm and steady. You speak as though courage is a spark that fades, she said. But I have watched him since that day. Not once has he sought glory for what he did. Not once has he spoken of his act. He lives simply, yet he works with kindness. He treats others with respect, no matter who they are. You call him an outsider. Yet he has lived among us in peace, never asking for more than a place to stand. Is this not a strength greater than pride, greater than power? The noble opened his mouth to reply, but the princess's words pressed too hard against his pride. He stepped back, unwilling to continue. Milan's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. Her words touched him in ways he could not explain. He had never known she had noticed him, let alone that she had watched him after the storm. To hear her speak with such trust and respect was both terrifying and humbling. Still, the crowd was divided. Some looked thoughtful, moved by her defense. Others remained angry, unwilling to accept a human as anything but weak. The sound of whispers returned, restless and uncertain. Then one of the elder women from the council spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Princess, your words are strong, but tradition is strong as well. Our people do not accept by speech alone. If this human is truly what you say he is, then let him prove it. Let him stand before the trials, and let the truth be shown in action, not just memory. Cheers rose from many in the crowd. Yes, the trials. Let him face them. Erin did not flinch. She turned her head toward Milan once again. Her eyes held no fear, only trust. He will stand, she said firmly, if trials are demanded. Then trials he will face, and I will stand beside him. Milan felt his legs weaken. Trials? He had no idea what they meant, no idea what challenges lay ahead. But in Arn's eyes, he saw faith. And in her words, he heard something that made his heart steady. She believed he could face what was coming, and somehow that belief gave him strength. The plaza remained filled with tension, but the decision was clear. The human would face trials before the people. Only then would his worth be measured. As the sun sank lower and the light turned golden, the crowd began to disperse, their voices buzzing with excitement and doubt. Some left angry, others thoughtful, but none were silent. Everyone waited for the trials to begin. Milan stayed near the stage, still trying to understand all that had happened. Erin stepped down from the platform, and for the first time, she stood face to face with him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried a warmth that softened the weight around his heart. "You wonder why I chose you," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "It is because I saw what others did not. You are more than you believe. Do not forget that." Milan swallowed hard, unable to find words, but in his silence, he felt a spark grow within him, not pride, not certainty, but a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, he could become what she believed. The night settled over the city, and with it came the promise of the trials ahead. The day after the great ceremony, the city of Arkan was no longer calm. Every street carried whispers of the human who had been chosen as husband of the princess. Markets were filled with debate, guards spoke in quiet tones at their posts, and nobles met in secret chambers to share their anger. Some called it an insult, others called it madness, but no one ignored it. Milan felt the weight of these whispers as he walked through the city. Wherever he went, eyes followed him. Some were curious, others sharp with dislike. Children pointed at him as their parents pulled them close. Shopkeepers paused their work when he passed. He was no longer invisible. He was a symbol, though he did not understand how or why. He returned to his small home on the edge of the district. The simple stone walls and wooden door had always given him comfort, but now they felt fragile, as if the world outside could break in at any moment. He sat at the table, his hands resting on the rough surface, his mind filled with questions. Why had she chosen him? Why had she spoken those words in front of thousands? And how could he face trials? He did not even understand. His thoughts were broken when the door opened. Guards stepped inside, their armor shining, their faces serious. Behind them came Princess Erin herself. She entered with quiet grace, her robe trailing behind her. The small home seemed too small for her presence. Milan stood quickly, his heart racing. He bowed his head without knowing if it was the right thing to do. "Princess," he said, his voice uncertain. Erin raised her hand gently. "No bowing," she said. "You are not a servant. You are the one I chose." The words made his chest tighten. He did not know if they gave him strength or fear. "You are troubled," she said, stepping closer. "You fear the trials." Milan nodded. "I do. I am no warrior. I do not know your customs. I do not even know what the trials are. How can I stand against them?" Erin studied him, her crystal eyes calm. "The trials are not only about strength," she explained. "They are about spirit, about the heart of the one who faces them. Some will test your body, some your mind, and some your will. They are designed to reveal the truth of a person, whether they are worthy to stand beside the throne." Milan's hands trembled. "But your people hate me. They will make the trials harder. They want me to fail." Her gaze softened. "Yes, many wish to see you fall. The nobles fear losing their power. The warriors fear losing their honor. But their fear is the reason I chose you. They must see that worth is not measured only by birth or strength." Milan lowered his head. "What if I cannot show them? What if I fail?" For a moment, Erin said nothing. Then she placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, carrying warmth. "Then you will fail with courage, and even in failure, they will see more than they expect. But I believe you will not fail." Her faith was a fire he did not understand. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But her voice carried such certainty that the words stuck in his throat. Before more could be said, a guard entered quickly and bowed. "Princess, the council has gathered. They demand to meet and decide the form of the trials." Erin nodded. "We will go." She turned to Milan. "You must be there as well. They will not speak of you without your presence." Milan's stomach tightened, but he followed. The guards escorted them through the wide streets toward the great council hall. The hall was vast, its ceiling carved high above, with tall pillars glowing faintly from the crystals embedded within. Around a long table sat the nobles and elders of the empire. Their robes shimmered with colors of rank, their eyes sharp as they fixed on Milan. The High Elder, a man with hair like silver threads, rose to speak. His voice was calm but heavy with judgment. "Princess, we respect your right to choose. But the throne does not belong to one alone. It belongs to the people. Your choice has shaken their trust. We cannot accept this human without proof. The trials will decide." Milan stood in silence as the elder turned to him. "Human, do you understand? These trials are not games. They are the measure of a life. If you fail, you will not only lose your place beside the princess, you will lose all honor in this empire." The words pressed hard on Milan's chest. He wanted to step back, but his feet held still. He looked around at the rows of faces, all watching, waiting for him to tremble. He thought of leaving, of walking out, of ending this madness. But then his eyes found Arn's. She sat tall, unbending, her gaze fixed on him with calm strength. She gave no words, but her presence was enough. Milan drew a breath. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will face the trials." A wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Some looked surprised at his steady answer, others smirked as if they expected him to regret his courage. The High Elder nodded. "Then it is settled. Tomorrow, at dawn, the first trial begins. Let the people see what the human is made of." The meeting ended, and the nobles rose, their robes flowing as they left. Some whispered to one another, already plotting, already certain of his failure. When the hall was empty, Milan turned to Erin. "Tomorrow?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Yes," she said. "It begins then. Do not fear. Walk into it as you walked into the storm. You did not ask if you could succeed that day. You simply acted. Do the same now." Her words echoed in his mind as they left the hall. The city outside was alive with sound. News of the trials spreading like wind across the towers and streets. Everywhere he looked, he saw faces filled with judgment, excitement, or doubt. The night came quickly, and Milan lay awake in his small home. He could not sleep. The image of the storm returned to him, the cries of children, the weight of water, the fear in his heart. He had acted then without thought, driven only by instinct. Could he do the same when the trials came? The first light of dawn crept across the city, painting the towers gold. In the distance, the drums of the empire began to sound, calling the people to gather. The trials of the human had begun. The plaza of Aachen filled once more at dawn. Drums echoed across the city, summoning people from every district, from the highest towers to the smallest streets. Citizens gathered to witness the beginning of the human's trials. No one wished to miss it. Some came with excitement, others with anger, but all came with curiosity. Milan stood at the edge of the great arena that had been prepared for him. His heart pounded as he looked at the towering stone walls, the banners fluttering above, and the endless sea of faces watching. The noise of the crowd was heavy, a mix of cheers, jeers, and whispers. He had never felt so small in his life. Beside him stood Princess Erin, calm and tall. Her presence steadied him more. Then he realized. She spoke quietly so only he could hear. "Remember, these trials are not only about strength. Use your mind, use your will. Do not let fear control you." Milan nodded, though his hands trembled. He drew in a slow breath. The High Elder stepped forward, his long robe trailing behind him. His voice carried across the arena. "The princess has chosen a human, a choice that shakes the throne itself. Today, we decide if he is worthy. These trials will test his strength, his wisdom, and his courage. If he fails, he is nothing. If he succeeds, we cannot deny the princess's will." The crowd roared. The elder raised his hand, the first trial strength. A heavy gate opened at the far end of the arena. From it stepped a warrior of Aachen, tall and broad, his body covered in gleaming armor. His weapon was a long staff, tipped with shining blades. He towered over Milan, his movements filled with confidence. The crowd cheered his name. Milan's stomach turned. He had no weapon, only his bare hands. The difference in size and skill was clear. The crowd expected his defeat. The warrior approached, bowing slightly to the princess, then turned his sharp eyes on Milan. "Human," he said, his voice deep, "do not think I will show mercy. This trial will break you." Milan said nothing. His mouth was dry. The elder signaled, and the trial began. The warrior charged, his staff sweeping through the air. Milan barely jumped aside in time, the weapon striking the ground with a crack that shook the stones. He stumbled, fear gripping him. Another strike came, fast and sharp. Milan dropped low, rolling away, his heart racing. The crowd laughed at his clumsy movements. Some shouted insults, calling him weak, unworthy. The warrior pressed forward, blows falling like storm winds. Milan's arms ached as he raised them to block, his body straining with each move. But as the fight went on, something stirred in Milan's mind. He could not match the warrior's strength, but he could watch his movements. Each strike had a rhythm, each step a pattern. The warrior fought with power, but not with thought. Milan began to move differently. Instead of blocking, he dodged. Instead of retreating blindly, he stepped carefully, making the warrior swing harder, faster, wasting his strength. The more he avoided, the more the warrior grew impatient. His strikes grew wild, his breath heavier. Finally, Milan saw his chance. When the warrior raised his staff high, Milan rushed forward, ducking under the swing, and pushed with all his weight against the warrior's leg. The giant stumbled, crashing to the ground with a roar. The crowd gasped. Milan did not strike. He only stepped back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The warrior tried to rise, but his weapon had slipped from his grip. The elder raised his hand. "Enough. The first trial is complete. The human has endured." The crowd erupted into mixed cries. Some cheered in surprise, others shouted in anger, but none could deny what they had seen. Milan had not overpowered the warrior, but he had stood against him and remained unbroken. Arn's eyes shone with pride. She gave him a small nod, a silent sign of trust. The elder spoke again. The second trial, wisdom. The arena shifted. Tables were brought forward, each holding strange puzzles of crystal and metal. The task was to unlock the shapes, a challenge that tested the mind. Several scholars from the council stepped forward as opponents. Milan sat at one table, his hands shaking as he touched the puzzle. The pieces were complex, twisting shapes that seemed impossible to fit together. The scholars moved quickly, their fingers trained, their eyes sharp. At first, Milan fumbled. The crowd laughed again, but he remembered Arn's words, "Use your mind." He slowed his breathing and studied the shapes carefully. He stopped rushing and started thinking. He noticed patterns the scholars missed, small grooves, hidden links. Piece by piece, he worked until at last the puzzle clicked into place. The crowd gasped. The scholars had not finished, but the human had solved his puzzle. The elder nodded. "The second trial is complete. The human has shown wisdom this time." The noise of the crowd was different. Many still doubted, but now some shouted Milan's name. Children clapped their hands. Even a few warriors looked thoughtful. But the trials were not over. The elder lifted his staff. The third trial, courage. The arena darkened as a gate opened once more. From the shadows came a beast, massive and fierce, its body covered in scales, its eyes glowing red. The crowd cried out in fear and excitement. The beast roared, shaking the walls of the arena. Milan froze. He had never seen such a creature. Its claws scraped the stone, its teeth sharp as blades. His legs felt weak. His body begged him to run. The elder's voice thundered. "Face the beast, human. Show us your courage." The gate behind Milan closed. There was no escape. The beast charged. Milan's breath caught in his throat. He dodged, barely avoiding the strike. Dust flew into the air. Stones cracked under its weight. The crowd roared. Fear gripped him, but he remembered the storm. He remembered the cries of children, the weight of water, the certainty that he would not survive. Yet still he had acted. He felt that same fire rise again. He picked up a broken staff from the ground, gripping it tight. It was no true weapon, but it was enough. The beast struck again, but Milan held his ground. He rolled to the side, struck at its face, and shouted with all his strength. He was small, but he would not run. The crowd watched, stunned, as the human faced the beast with shaking hands but unbroken will dot at last. The beast stopped, it sniffed, the air, growled, and slowly backed away. It did not bow, but it did not attack again. The elder raised his hand. The third trial is complete. The human has shown courage. The crowd roared louder than before. For the first time, many cheered openly. Others stood in silence, unable to deny what they had seen. Milan dropped the staff, his body shaking, his breath heavy, but his eyes alive. He had endured the trials. He had not been perfect, but he had stood, and he had not broken. Princess Erin stepped forward, her voice ringing across the arena. You see now what I saw. This human is not weak. He has faced your strength, your wisdom, and your fear, and he has endured. This is why I chose him. This is why he will stand beside me. The crowd's voices mixed again, but the balance had shifted. Doubt remained, but respect had begun to grow. The human had proven something none expected. Milan stood in the arena, his chest rising and falling, his mind still reeling. He had survived the trials, but deep in his heart, he knew this was not the end. Something greater was still to come. The city of Arkan buzzed with voices long after the trials ended. Everywhere Milan walked, people pointed, whispered, or stared in silence. Some looked at him with doubt, some with dislike, but many now looked at him with respect. He had faced warriors, puzzles, and even a beast, and still stood. No one could deny it anymore. But the air in the palace felt heavy. Princess Erin noticed it first. She could sense unease in the council chamber, whispers that spread too quickly, and guards that seemed more watchful than before. Something stirred beneath the victory of the trials. That night, Milan sat in the garden of the palace, looking up at the strange stars of this alien world. His arms still ached from the fights, and his legs felt weak, but his mind was restless. He thought of Earth, of the small life he had left behind. He wondered if he would ever see his world again. Erin joined him, her steps light on the stone path. She stood beside him for a moment before speaking. You were brave today, more brave than most of my people expected. Milan smiled faintly. I was scared the whole time. That is what courage is, she said, to act even when fear holds you. They sat in silence, listening to the night winds. But suddenly, a guard rushed into the garden, his face pale. He knelt before Erin. Princess, the council calls for you. There is news of danger beyond the mountains. The sky watchers have seen fire in the night, ships. Not ours. Erin's eyes grew sharp. She rose at once, motioning for Milan to follow. Together they entered the council chamber, where the elders gathered with tense faces. A glowing map hovered in the air, showing the mountains east of Arkan. Red marks moved slowly across it. They are not ours, an elder said, his voice low. They come from the stars, and they come in numbers. We do not yet know their intent. But no fleet has entered our skies in centuries. Another elder frowned. It may be war. The room filled with murmurs. Erin stood tall, her voice calm but firm. If this is a threat, we must prepare. Our people will not face it unready. Milan listened, his heart heavy. He could not believe how quickly things had changed, only yesterday. His greatest fear was surviving the trials. Now a greater danger loomed over an entire world. Later that night, when the council dismissed, Erin walked with Milan in the quiet halls. This is why I chose you, she said softly. I felt something was coming, something that would test us all, and now it is here. Milan stopped, unsure. But what can I do? I am only one man. I cannot fight armies or lead fleets. Erin looked at him with steady eyes. You think only of what you are not, but you forget what you are. And the trials, you did not win with strength. You won with heart. That is what my people need. That is what I need. Her words struck something deep in him, though doubt still lingered. The next day, the city prepared. Soldiers marched through the streets. Weapons gleamed under the sun, and scouts were sent to the mountains. The people spoke with fear. but also with determination. They had not faced a true enemy for generations. Milan trained with the guards. Though he felt small among them, they towered over him, their armor shining, their blades sharp. Yet he kept trying, his movement steady, his spirit strong. Some of the guards began to nod at him, no longer with scorn, but with quiet respect. Days later, news arrived. The ships had landed beyond the mountains. They carried warriors of a different race, tall and dark, with glowing eyes and weapons unknown to Arkan. They came not to trade or speak, but to conquer. Villages near the borders had already fallen silent. The council called another gathering in the grand hall. The people filled it, their voices anxious. The elder raised his staff. The trials are ended. But now begins the true test. An enemy comes from beyond the stars. They mean to take our land, our homes, our lives. We must stand together. The people shouted in answer, some with courage, others with fear. Aaron stepped forward. This is no time for doubt. We will not bow to those who come to take what is ours. We will stand, and we will fight. The crowd roared in approval. But then, the elder lifted his hand. His eyes turned to Milan. And what of the human? He has passed our trials, but will he face war? Will he stand with us, or will he turn away? All eyes turned toward Milan. Thousands of faces watched him. He felt his chest tighten, his throat dry. He wanted to run, to hide. But he remembered the children during the storm, the beast in the arena, and Arn's words. He stepped forward, his voice steady though quiet. I will not run. I will stand with you. If this enemy comes for your home, then they come for mine as well, because you gave me a place here. I will fight, not because I am strong, but because it is right. The hall fell silent. Then, slowly, voices rose in approval. First a few, then many. The sound grew until the hall shook with the cheers of the people. Arn's eyes softened with pride. She whispered, now they see what I saw. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Walls were reinforced, weapons sharpened, and fleets made ready. Scouts returned with dark tales of the enemy, their cruelty and hunger for power. The people of Arkan braced themselves for battle. Milan trained harder than ever. His body ached. His hands blistered, but he did not stop. He knew he could never match the strength of Arkan's warriors, but he could give his courage, and courage, he believed, might inspire more than strength ever could. One evening, as the sun sank behind the towers, Aaron stood with Milan on the palace balcony. Below them, the city glowed with torchlight, alive with both fear and hope. The enemy comes soon, she said. When they do, we must be ready. This battle will decide the fate of my people. Milan looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Then I will be ready too. She gave a rare smile. You are not just ready, Milan. You are already part of this world. Whether you see it or not, far beyond the mountains. The sky burned red with the fire of enemy ships. The true threat had come, greater than any trial. And now, the human and the princess would face it together. The morning air was sharp and cold over the city of Arkan. Soldiers lined the walls, their armor glinting under the rising suns. Banners fluttered high, and the citizens waited anxiously behind the barricades. The enemy ships were visible on the horizon, dark shapes against the pale light, carrying warriors who had come to conquer. Milan stood among the city's defenders, gripping a sword in his hands. His body was tired from days of preparation, but his mind was clear. He looked at Princess Erin, standing tall at the front of the battlements. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her presence steadying those around her. You are ready? She asked. Her voice calm but firm. Milan nodded. I will do my best. That is all I ask, she said. Remember, courage matters more than strength. Lead with it, and others will follow. The enemy advanced, their ships descending toward the plains below the city. The ground shook as warriors disembarked, strange creatures moving in formation, their weapons glowing in the sunlight. Their eyes were cold, their intent clear. The defenders braced. The first wave of attackers surged forward, charging with a force that made the walls tremble. Arrows flew, shields clashed. and the air filled with the sound of battle. Milan took a deep breath and leapt forward. Joining the front lines, the enemy were faster and stronger than most of the city's warriors expected, but Milan moved with careful precision. He remembered the trials, the beast, the puzzles, and the storm. Each memory gave him guidance, teaching him that courage and thinking quickly could overcome brute force. A warrior lunged at him with a glowing spear. Milan dodged, rolling to the side, and struck with his sword. The enemy fell back, stunned. Around him, other soldiers shouted and fought, their movements coordinated. Milan realized he was not alone. Courage spread like fire. The human had inspired them. From above the walls, Erin gave orders, directing archers and commanders. Her voice carried across the battlefield, clear and commanding. Milan glanced at her, and in that moment, he understood why she had chosen him. She trusted him to act, to lead when needed, and to inspire hope. The battle grew fiercer. Enemy warriors climbed the walls, their claws tearing at stone. Milan rushed to help a group of archers under attack. He fought with every ounce of energy, blocking, striking, and shouting to guide the defenders. He was not the strongest, but he was the one who moved others, who gave courage where fear had taken hold. Suddenly, a massive creature broke through the gates of the city. Its scales were dark, and its eyes glowed with red fire. The soldiers froze, unsure if they could face it. Milan's heart pounded, but he did not hesitate. He charged forward, drawing the creature's attention. The battle around him slowed. Everyone watching. The creature swung its massive claws, and Milan dodged narrowly. He remembered the arena, the beast he had faced during the trials. Fear gripped him, but he moved with precision, using his size and speed to strike weak points. He ran toward the creature, jumping onto its back with a careful leap. Soldiers cheered from below. With skill and courage, Milan guided the creature away from the city, striking and dodging until it could not fight back. Finally, with a coordinated effort from the soldiers, the beast was defeated. The crowd erupted in cheers. But the battle was not over. More enemy warriors poured through the plains, and the defenders had to hold the walls and gates. Milan and Erin moved together, side by side, directing the city's forces. Her strategy was brilliant, his courage inspiring, and together they created a wall of resistance no enemy could easily break. Hours passed, the battle raged, but slowly. The tide turned, the enemy began to retreat, confused by the defenders' strength and unity. The citizens of Arkan had fought with everything they had, inspired by the human who had once seemed small and weak. At the final moment, Milan stood on the highest tower of the city, watching the last of the enemy ships retreat into the sky. His arms ached, his body was bruised, and his clothes were torn, but his heart was light. He had faced something greater than any trial, greater than any fear. He had led, inspired, and endured. Erin joined him on the tower, her robes fluttering. In the wind, she looked at the city, the defenders, and finally at Milan. "You did it," she said softly. "You stood when others feared. You showed courage, wisdom, and heart. Today, the city sees what I've known all along." Milan shook his head, still catching his breath. "I did not do it alone. The people fought with me. You led us. Without your guidance, I would have failed." Erin smiled. "We stood together. That is the true strength of Arkan. But today, you became more than a human outsider. You became part of this world, part of my people, part of me." The citizens cheered from below, their voices filling the city with celebration. Milan realized that the fear and doubt that had followed him since his arrival had disappeared. He had earned a place here, not because of his birth, not because of his strength, but because of his courage and heart. The High Elder approached the tower, his face solemn but approving. "You have passed the final trial, human, not one of strength nor wisdom, but the trial of the heart. You have faced the true threat, and you have stood tall." The princess chose wisely. Milan bowed slightly, feeling the weight of the words. He had never imagined such honor, nor could he have believed the journey that had brought him here. Erin reached for his hand, her eyes shining. "Come, Milan. Today, we celebrate not just victory, but a new beginning. The people of Arkan gathered in the plaza, cheering for their heroes. Milan stood beside Aaron, feeling a sense of belonging he had never known. The city had seen the humans' courage, and he had seen the power of trust, unity, and determination. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the towers in gold and crimson, Milan realized that the trials, the battles, and the fear had all led him here. He was no longer an outsider. He was a husband, a protector, and a symbol of hope. The enemy had been defeated. The city was safe. And the human who had once stood silently at the base of the royal stage now stood with the princess, facing a future full of promise, courage, and honor. The people cheered, fireworks lit the sky, and for the first time, Milan felt truly at home.